Hello everyone and welcome to my last lecture on performance appraisal. Just to recapitalize as to what we have done in the previous lecture, so we just completed the things related with performance appraisal. We know that what is the meaning of performance appraisal. Performance appraisal is a systematic method of evaluating the performance that has been given by the employee over a period of time. And then we had also discussed something related to the objectives, then we talked about the process, then we talked about the elements, so on and so forth. Now today what I'm going to talk about is I'm going to talk about the methods of performance appraisal. So you all know that what is the meaning of performance appraisal, why performance appraisal is being done. In simple language, performance appraisal is being done in order to demarcate between the efficient and inefficient employees, productive and the unproductive employees, so that the different kind of decisions they can be taken by the management related to the promotion or maybe the increment or maybe transfers or maybe fringe benefits, so on and so forth. So let me begin with this lecture of mine today, which is on the methods of performance appraisal. So we know that in the case of performance appraisal, there is a word which is known as feedback. In my previous lecture, I spoke about things related to feedback. Feedback is a word which you cannot remove from performance appraisal. So feedback has to be given. There can be two kind of feedback, as I told you, positive and negative, and things related to feedback we've already discussed. So once we are talking about the methods of performance appraisal also, so there also somewhere or the other feedback is being given about the way the person has performed over a period of time. And if you all remember, in my previous lectures, I gave you a gist of the self-appraisal form also. Most of the organization, they ask their employees to fill up that form. So while filling up that form, it is just not the financial targets that have to be attained by the ratee. There are other parameters also which are looked upon. For example, it can be related with supervision, it can be related with machinery, it can be related with team building, communication, attendance, misconduct, so on and so forth. So let's begin with this methods of performance appraisal. So my dear friends, there are basically two methods of performance appraisal. One is the traditional method and one is the modern method. So as you can see on the screen, in the traditional method, these are the ways by which the performance appraisal can be done. These are the ways. So you have to bear in mind that all the organization will not deploy all the methods. It will be again the call of the management to take a decision which method they are adopting and which method they find it more suitable to their employees. So let's begin with the traditional method. So there can be some kind of traditional methods. So these traditional methods, it's all can be related with ranking method, paired comparison, grading, force distribution, force choice, checklist method, critical incident method, graphic scale method, essay method, field review, confidential report. In the case of modern method, it can be MBO, management by objectives, behaviorally anchored weighting scales, then assessment centers, cost management method and 360-degree appraisal. So let me begin with the first one, the straight ranking one. So the first traditional method is a very, very common method to evaluate the performance of an employee. And it is said that it is the oldest and the simplest form of making the assessment of the performance of the employee, which is compared with the others for the purpose of placing the order of worth. So we are actually finding the worth of a person and we are ordering it from best to worst or worst to best, whatever it is, or from lowest to highest or highest to lowest. So this is simple ranking method, and here is like the whole person is compared with the other whole person. For example, if two people are singing a song, and if one person's song seems more melodious to your ears, so you will say that okay, he sang better than A, sang better than B sang better than C. So you are making that order. So it's just a ranking method. So you are just giving a rank. And then whole person is compared to the whole person. Mr. A singing was better than Mr. B's and B singing was better than C. So that's an order that you have made. So without actually analyzing the performance. So it is one of the oldest and simple methods, but it has got several weaknesses also, that it involves the biasness and a snap judgment. Snap means very quick judgment. So if two people are singing a song, so immediately said, no, this song is my favorite. So because if you remember, one of the limitation of the performance appraisal was that there can be some biases from the part of the appraiser also. So if the person is singing a favorite song of yours and it's quite mellifluous to your ears, so you will immediately say no. this Mr. A's song is the best. So that is known as the snap judgment. So one of the biggest drawback which is associated with the ranking method is that it's a snap judgment. Then difficult to rank is having varying behavior pattern. It indicates only how a person stands in relation to the other in the group, but not how much. There is no degree involved. Mr. A singing is better than B, but where is the difference? You will not be able to make it out. Or by how much it is, you will not be able to make it out. So simple ranking is just the oldest method of evaluating the performance of the person, and we are just giving the ranks, and they can be high biasness of or rather high level of bias. So this is one of the most oldest way of evaluating the performance of the person, and where the biasness level of the rater is very, very high. The second one is known as the paired comparison. Now, the paired comparison method, in this method, the employee is actually compared with the other employee on one-to-one basis, and usually based on one trait. Please understand what is the meaning of trait. Trait is the particular characteristic on which you are actually evaluating the person. So, here the person is compared with the other person. The number of times an employee is judged is better than the others determines his rank. So, for example, if supposing if there are 5 people, for example, if there are 5 people, so A, B, C, D, E. So, the A's performance will be compared with B, B with C, C with D, then E, then A's performance will be compared with C, then with D, then with E, then B's performance will be compared with C, then with D, with E. So, these are the ways by which the comparison is being made by one-to-one. So, one of the so how many combinations do we get? We get it with the help of this formula n minus 1 by 2. This is the division part, n minus 1 by 2. N is basically the total number of employees to be evaluated, and as I told you, if there are 5 employees, so naturally the formula would be, if supposing if 5 people are to be there whose performances have to be evaluated, then 5 minus 1 divided by 2. That means there would be 10 pairs that would be made, and then we are going to find out the conclusion. So, this method is much more easier and simpler than the ranking method, but it is subjective because appraisal is not based on a specific job related performance, because it is related with only one trait only, rather. It is related with one trait. We are talking about the trait in the case of paired comparison. So, the pairs so ascertained actually will give us the maximum possible permutation and combination. That means here we have got 10 pairs. So, the number of times a worker is considered better makes his or her score. Such scores are basically determined for each worker and is ranked accordingly to her score. So, one obvious disadvantage which is associated with this method is that the method can become unwidely or it's like become very cumbersome when large number of employees they have to be compared. So, in case if there were only 5 employees, so this method was quite better. But supposing if there are 50, then how many pairs you are going to compare? So, that is very, very tedious task. So, this is slightly better than the ranking method, because in the ranking method we were just ranking the people as per their performance. But here in the case of paired comparison, every employee is compared with the other employee on one-to-one basis and basically on one trait only. So, here it is that we deploy this formula of n minus 1 upon 2 to find out the number of possible pairs, and as soon as the person gets better, he or she gets a score, and then at the end it is actually evaluated. Then the third method is known as the grading method, and in this grading method there are certain categories of worth which are actually established well in advance, and for example there can be some categories related with outstanding, satisfactory and unsatisfactory. So, if a person is performing, we just say okay, his work was satisfactory, the other's work was unsatisfactory, or it was outstanding. So, however, there can be more than 3 grades also. For example, very dissatisfied, highly dissatisfied. So, here the person's grade is actually compared with those persons. Or in other words, if you all remember grading also, like we have it in the case of job evaluation, where we can have grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4 people, and then they would be getting different kind of salary structure. So, but that grading is slightly different from this grading method. Here we have got some predetermined categories of worth which are actually established. So it's like one of the biggest drawbacks which is associated with this kind of method is that the rater may rate most of the employees on a higher side. So there is no objectivity involved. So if he says that okay, if there are 10 employees, maybe for 8 of them he gives outstanding. So what is the criteria? That may be unknown to the person. So this is one of the biggest drawback. But it is very easy to understand, easy to apply in appraising the performance of the employees in an organization. And here again it has that kind of similarity effect. If you remember the similarity effect which I discussed at the time of discussing the limitations of performance appraisal. So if the person finds the similar trait or similar quality, then the person will automatically rate the person on a higher side. So this is one of the biggest drawback which is associated with this. Then another method, traditional method of performance appraisal is known as the forced distribution. Now in the case of forced distribution, it is a method where rater is required to distribute his rating in the form of a normal frequency distribution. Now this figure is in the next slide. This is actually more like a bell shaped. So once we have a bell shape, so somebody will be ranking here, somebody will be ranking here, somebody will be here, somebody will be here. Somebody's performance will be very, very good, somebody's performance will be not that very good. So it's in a kind of a bell-shaped diagram where we have got the frequency. And this is one of the good ways, because we know here all the employees, they cannot be very good, all the employees, they cannot be very bad, some may be good, some may be bad. So here it is a kind of a forced distribution or a bell-shaped curve which is actually drawn here. And the main purpose is to eliminate the rater's bias or central tendency. Here ranking technique is actually used in the case of forced distribution. As I told you, it's in a kind of a bell-shaped diagram. So some techniques are adopted with the help of it, and then some kind of subjectivity can be involved here also. This method is highly simple to understand and easier to apply. Secondly, it helps to reduce the biasness involved in the straight ranking and the paired comparison. In the straight ranking, it was just the rank 1, 2, 3, 4. In the paired comparison, the permutation and combination were being made with the help of this formula, and then each person's performance was compared with the another person on the basis of one trait. So this is again which we can reduce in the case of forced distribution. But in this method, employees are placed in a central category and not certain category and not ranked within a category. So this is a way by which we proceed with this kind of appraisal. This method is based on same distribution of good and poor performers. Only then we find out, okay, who is good, who is bad, or who is a poor performer. The rater does not explain why. There is no answer to the question why an employee is placed in a particular category. So specific job related criteria is not used in this case of forced distribution method. So this is how, for example, if I told you it's in the shape of a bell-shaped diagram. So this is a bell-shaped diagram. For example, there can be number of employees. So 10% they are below average, or maybe 20% they are below average, or maybe 20%, 40% they are in average, or 20% they are good, or maybe 10% they are excellent. So what criteria it is being used? That is not very specifically stated in the case of forced choice method. Then that was the forced distribution method. Now one I am going to discuss is the forced choice method. Actually this method was developed by J.P. Guilford, and it contains a series of group of statements, and the rater rates how effectively a statement describes individual who is being evaluated. So for example, in this forced choice method, please understand the word choice. So the choice is being given, you have to say the choice is like for most or least, for example. So if I want to say whether the person is regular to the job most of the time or least of the time, informs in advance for delay most of the time. So the choice is being given only between two things, the most and the least. So this is how the people are evaluated. For example, there can be some kind of positive statements, and there can be some kind of negative statements also. For example, a pair of negative statements may be as follows. For example, the person makes promises beyond his limit to keep them, or he or she is inclined to favor some employees. So this is a kind of a negative statement, yes or no, or most likely, or least. So this is how the statements are given. Now what happens is, like, each statement carries a score. Here the scores, each statement has a score which is not made known to the rater. The human resource or the HR section actually does the rating for all set of statements. So the employee rating in this manner makes the method more objective. The only problem which is associated, my dear friends, with this method is that the actual constructing of the several evaluative statements, these statements, I am talking about these statements are called forced choice scales, and it takes a lot of time and energy and effort also. So these scores are actually evaluated by the HR department. The rater also doesn't know about them. Then these statements have to be made properly, thinking on various criteria, and then the person is asked to be evaluated on the criteria for most and least. The next method that we have got is the checklist method. When we are talking about checklist, is like simple checking list, like, okay, checklist, you have to check. For example, if I ask you, do you have a scooter? Yes. For example, if I ask you, you have a scooter, there is a, like for here the statements are actually given, and here yes and no. So, or in the case of checklist method, how do we evaluate the performance of the person? Is like by asking yes or no. So, here is like the main basic purpose of utilizing the checklist method is to ease the evaluation burden upon the rater. So, the rater doesn't have to write anything, the rater has just to say yes and no, yes and no. So, there can be a series of statements, and these questions are there with the answers yes or no, which are well prepared by the HR department, and then these questions or statements, they are actually presented to the rater to tick. We understand in the case of checklist method, he or she has to tick. Cut. Here the rater has to tick the appropriate answer of yes and no. So here for example, if the behavior of the employee is positive or negative to each statement, so yes or no. For example, if I say, if Mr. X is regular on the job, yes or no. Does he maintains discipline? Well, yes or no. For example, does he ever make mistakes? Yes or no. Does he shows favoritism? Yes or no. So these are the statements which are actually given. So they can be at times they can be some positive checks, they can be some kind of negative checks. So here there are simple and forced choice and weighted checklist. And again, this method is more descriptive and provide concrete examples of evaluation. Why? Because the rater is only asked, tick yes or no, tick this, tick this, tick this. Then the scores can be given to the various statements, and then these scores can be, well, they are sent to the HR department, and then the final scores are prepared by the HR department, and then the decisions are taken. But one of the biggest drawback which is associated with this checklist method is, first of all, we have to maintain those, we have to formulate those statements. Then these statements have to be well thought on which criteria these statements have to be made. And then for every statement, for every employee, the scores have to be given, and then these scores have to be calculated. So it's very time consuming process and very expensive also, because whosoever will be doing it will be charging. And difficult to assemble, analyze and weight several statements properly. At times these statements, they may not talk about volumes, about the performance of the person. So this is one of the biggest drawback which is associated with the checklist method of yes and no. The statements are given, and then the person is required to give the answers yes or no. Then another method, traditional method of performance appraisal is known as the critical incident method. Now, in this method, the rater actually focuses his or her attention on those key or critical behaviors that make the difference between performing a job in a noteworthy manner, effectively or ineffectively. As the word itself is saying, critical, that means some important, critical means something, some important, and incident means some situation, you can call it as a situation also. So here, what happens is that a list of noteworthy good or bad on the job behavior of specific incident is prepared, and then a group of experts, they are assigned weightage to these scores to this incident depending upon the degree of desirability to perform a job. And these critical incident For example, if one wants to check how the person actually reacted to a particular situation, so that would be a kind of a critical situation. So was it desirable, was it not desirable, whether the person was able to control the situation, yes or no. If the person was able to control the situation, that means the person's performance was very nice. For example, if there is a DM of a district, and if there is a situation of maybe some curfew or some disturbances in that particular area. So if the DM was able to control the situation, that means the DM's performance was good. And if the DM was not able to control the situation of that particular district, that means he did not perform as he should have performed, and his performance is not up to the level. So that critical situation is the particular situation and how the person has behaved. So definitely it's like in the critical incident method, it focuses more on the behaviors, and then the performance is actually judged. So as you can see on the screen also, that there can be at times some positive behaviors, there can be some negative behavior. These incidences are identified through a study of job and discussion with the staff, maybe a fire situation, how was it handled by the management or by the manager, sudden breakdown of a machinery, as I gave you the example of a DM, district magistrate of a particular district, or a serious incident. So these are the incidences which can happen in a factory or any working organization. So how a person behaved in those areas or at that time is what is actually evaluated. So this method helps to avoid vague impression and general remark, as the rating is based on the actual records. So for example, if you all remember when we were talking about the limitation, so there was the limitation of similarity effect, if you all remember, or it was related with the maybe the common error, like if the person is given average marking, so average rating is being done. So that kind of things, they are not possible in this kind of rating method, critical incident method, because it is actually based on some actual occurrence of a particular performance. So it is the rater's inferences that determine which incidences are critical to the job performance. And definitely this kind of method also has some kind of drawback also, but the feedback from actual events can be discussed with the employee to allow the improvement. So this is more of a, what we can call it is a more of a pragmatic or a practical kind of evaluation which is done by the management for the employee. So here also, for example, if there was any incident, so there are workers A, B, C, D, E, then the scores are mentioned, inform the supervisor, became anxious, tried to repair the machinery, complained of the poor performance, or was happy to get forced rest. So these are the options. How the person behaved, how the person handled the situation is what actually talks about in this method. So the best is like, in case if there was a breakdown of a machine in a factory, the best way is like immediately the person informed the supervisor, then the supervisor would have taken the call what has to be done. So this is the point which is being given the highest score, and so on and so forth. Then another kind of traditional method of performance appraisal is the graphic rating method. It is more of a numerical scale which is actually developed, and here in the case of graphic rating scale, which is one of the most popular and the simplest techniques for appraising the performances, and at times this is also known as the linear rating scale. In this method, there is a printed appraisal form which is actually used to appraise the employee. For example, there can be some kind of performance factors, anything which is related with the accuracy, anything related with the skill or the completion of the work. So for example, at times we have got those Likert scales also, Likert scale, for example, how satisfactory was the work, very satisfied, dissatisfied, occasionally satisfied, sometimes satisfied, so on and so forth. So these are actually basically the scales which are actually formed. So they can be some kind of list of traits can be used, such as the quality and the reliability, which can actually check the performance of an employee. So here the forms are actually distributed to the people, and then the form contains several characteristics. It can be related with the intelligence part, quality of work, leadership skill, judgment, team building. For example, it can be related with communication, it can be related with the attendance, it can be related with behavior, all those parameters, if you all remember, which we talked about in the self-assessment, the KPIs actually, key performing indicators. So here the scales are set and the one has to tick actually. Then the rater records his judgment about the employee traits on that scale, and those scales are meant, again, they can be 5-pointer or 6-pointer or 7-pointer scales which can be used by the people, and the traits can be evaluated. For example, how was the quality of work done? So it can be consistently satisfactory, unsatisfactory, yeah, sometimes superior, sometimes less superior, whatever. These scales can be set. Then the numerical points are given to the employee are added up to find the overall scale performance. So this is more of a mathematical calculations which are involved. So these rating scales, they can be two types, continuous and discontinuous. In continuous scale, the degree of traits are measured in the number ranging from 0 to 5, and the discontinuous scales, they are actually appropriate boxes which are used. So for example, the performance can be from 0 to 5. So how do you feel? Number 3, number 4, whatever. The person has to tick, and in the case of discontinuouses, the boxes can be used. So here look at this, continuous scale is like from 0 to 5 is being used. In the discontinuous, how was the performance? Poor, average, good and excellent. So the scale is not used here. Continuous scale is not used. So it's quite easy to understand and use, it's quite economical, nothing much has to be done. But what is what are the drawbacks which are associated? It's quite subjective, and each trait is equally important for a job. So at times it becomes very difficult that how many traits we are going to use and how many traits should be mentioned on that paper. And then descriptive words are used in rating scale. It imposes heavy burden on the rater. Why? Because why there's a heavy burden? Because lot of traits have to be evaluated, right? So these traits can be all related with teamwork, the ones which I just discussed before also. It can be related with the quality of work, with the damage, or maybe with attendance, or with machinery, or anything related with supervisory or supervision, so on and so forth. So these are the drawbacks which are associated. Then another kind of traditional method that we have got is known as the free form or essay method. In the essay method, it's one of the most simplest one amongst the various methods available. Basically, in this method, the rater will write a narrative description on the employee's strength, weaknesses and performance potential and suggestions. So here, a lot of things depend upon the writing skills of the rater. If the person is not good at writing skills, then this method becomes very bad. So generally, employee is evaluated on what? He is evaluated on the basis of the strength, weaknesses, the performances, or maybe the potential, or then maybe some kind of suggestions can be given, how he or she can improve the performance. So this description is actually factual as seen by the rater, and it can provide a good deal of information about the employee and the evaluator. And this method actually suffers from the drawbacks that it's like the appraisal will be ineffective if the person doesn't have that very good writing skill, and it's a very time consuming and very difficult to compare the two appraisals. Then we've got something known as the field review. In this method, the training officer from the personnel department will interview the supervisors to evaluate their subordinates. So again, it's a call of the HR department, and they prepare the questionnaire to find out the various traits, and then the question answers they can be placed. So, but again, please understand, one of the limitation is the supervisor's personal bias can always creep in, which is applicable everywhere. Then another kind of method that we have got is a confidential report. As the word itself is telling us that the confidential report, that it is actually people, they don't even come to know that they are being evaluated, and immediate boss will evaluate the employees, maybe the strength, weaknesses, achievement, failure, personality, behavior, all those things are evaluated along with the performances of the people, or maybe at the some critical incidences can also be quoted if it is needed. So but there can be some kind of drawback. It's very time consuming. As you can see, there can be some time lapses, subjective judgment, that means the biasness can be involved, and the supervisor, he or she himself can commit the errors in recognizing and recording the behavior of the different employees. So these were the traditional methods, my dear friends. Let's talk about the modern methods. Now, these modern methods, there are definitely a lot of biasnesses which are there, but these modern methods include the management by objective, behaviorally anchored scale, assessment centers, cost accounting method, and 3 degrees, 6 degrees appraisal. The first one is about the management by objective. This was a method which was actually developed by Peter F. Drucker in 1954, and it's a method which says that okay, everything will be done by the people only. This is more of a goal setting approach, that people are asked to do everything on their own. Then actually they find it out to what an extent it is a successful. So this is basically, it has got 4 steps. For example, the goal setting, then the performance standards are set by people, then the comparison is being done, then the periodic reviews are taken and the feedbacks are given, and then the corrective actions can be taken. So basically this was done, it was, as I told you, it was actually given by Peter F. Drucker, and he propounded with this concept in the year 1954. So here everything, the concept of MBO is actually, as I told you, it's a process where superior and subordinates, they will jointly identify the common goals, they will make efforts, they will set the standards, and then they will decide upon the area of responsibility, and everything will be in a combined way. More of a joint effort which is actually being done by the management and the employees. So jointly they are doing it together. Then another one is all related with the behaviorally anchored rating scale. This is a method which combines the graphic rating scales and the critical incident methods. Again, there are different bars which are actually made, and with the help of these bars, they are actually they are known as the behaviorally anchored rating scales, and again there can be different scales which can be used to observe the different job behavior of the employees, and again here the actual performance is judged against the desired performance. If you remember, when we were talking about the process of performance appraisal, there is always a comparison that is actually made. So the steps involved are basically here, there are different steps which are involved in the behaviorally anchored scale. For example, there have to be certain kind of critical incidences which have to be formulated. Then there can be some kind of performance dimensions can be set, which can be clustered into a small set of performance dimensions. Then the incidences, they are collected, then the scaling is done, and then we actually develop the instrument which is known as the bars. And these incidences, they can be different kind of clusters which can be used to assess the behavior pattern and the performances dimensions of the employee. Then we have got something which is known as the assessment center. An assessment center is a group of employees drawn from different work units, and these employees, they work together on an assignment similar to the one they would be handling when promoted. So a lot of people, they come together, and lot of people are in basket activities they are given to the people, and lot of reports and emails they are all given to people to assess. And again here this was the concept which was actually traced back in the year 1930 in Germany, which used to appraise its army officers. So this is like more of a group kind of appraisal system which is being done, and basically it is being done for the evaluating the executive or the supervisory potential of the people. So here people will come together, and lot of things are handed over to people, and then we see how people are behaving and how they are well participating in the entire process, and then the evaluation is actually done by the people. So this is actually more for the senior level management people. Then second last method of modern method is all related with the HR accounting. My dear friends, accounting is nothing but is again making a calculation. So in the case of HR accounting, we are assessing that how much money is being spent by the company on a particular employee and what kind of returns the person is giving back to the company. So if the person is contributing more than what is being spent by him, by the company on him, naturally the person is performing better, and then the decisions can be taken, and the vice versa. So it's more of HR is a valuable asset, it's all mentioned. And here the most important part is we are evaluating in terms of money. How much money is being spent by the person, by the company, and what kind of returns the person is given. So this is, if the returns are greater than the amount spent, that means the person is good enough. And if the returns are less than the amount spent, that means the person is not good enough and the performance needs improvement. So here the cost of HR consists of the expenditure on recruitment, selection, induction, training, compensation, everything is all included, and then the money value of the labor productivity is calculated. And my dear friends, the last method of the modern methods of performance appraisal is all related to 360-degree appraisal. In my previous lectures also I have discussed about this 360-degree appraisal method, and this method was the first developed and formally used by the General Electric Company of USA in 1992. And in India, there are a lot of companies, top-notch companies like Reliance, Wipro, Infosys, other companies who have been using this method of appraising the performance of their employees. This method says that it is just not your superior who is going to tell you about, who is going to talk about the performance. It is everywhere. 360 means all the round. So whether it is the top management or the subordinates or the self is the self-appraisal form, if you remember, we just talked about, where everyone is supposed to fill up the self-appraisal form. Or maybe your colleagues, your immediate supervisor, or maybe the customers with whom you are dealing. Everyone's viewpoint is taken into consideration about how you have been performing, because I told you that performance appraisal is not only related with the financial attainment of the financial target, but there are other things also which are taken into consideration, like maybe the team building, or maybe the attendance, or maybe the behavior pattern, so on and so forth. So it is all around the corner. Everyone is keeping an eye on your performance. So my dear friends, if you are working in any company or in any organization, be very careful that it's just not your supervisor who is going to check your performance, but it will be everyone, right from your supervisor, the top management, the subordinates, the colleagues, maybe the client with whom you are dealing with, or the customers, or maybe the suppliers, or maybe the distributors. Everyone is contributing towards your performance appraisal. So be very, very careful the next time you perform or do any task. So my dear friends, these were all the methods of performance appraisal that we have talked about. We just discussed about the traditional and the modern methods. So with this, we bring an end to the performance appraisal topic. I will be catching up with my next lecture on a new topic. So by this time, I am sure you have a better understanding, or you are well equipped with the concept of performance appraisal and its other aspects also. Thank you so much, and stay tuned for the next one.